Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in, listening in. My name is Michael and I'm the gallery director here at the Arts HQ Gallery here in Surprise. And we are today talking with an artist, Lee Hendrickson, who will be one of 4 featured artists in our upcoming show, Expressions of the West Valley, which opens October 16th. And so, Lee, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for speaking with us today.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me to join in the exhibition coming up in October.
Yeah. And so I just really want to jump right in. I have viewed some of your work, and I think it's super captivating and super unique. You have a unique process, and so I really want to just jump in and just kind of ask about your process of creating the pieces that you create. Right.
Well, my work is different. It's very unique. What I do is I grow crystals on a glass microscope slide. And these are organic crystals that you can grow in a period of a few hours to a few days. And when I mean that, I'm growing them by evaporating a solution on a slide. So crystals grow in my studio much like frost would form on a window. It's just a thin layer of crystals. I put those under the microscope. I have a camera attached to my microscope, and I then search that crystalline array that's grown on the slide for patterns, compositions, color that I find interesting. And if I like an area of the slide, I will take a photo. And that's what I share then with my audience is these photographs of crystals. It's typically a field no bigger than the head of a pin, actually, that gets magnified many thousands of times in the print, which then goes on the wall. It can be up to 6 feet, let's say. So you're looking at tens of thousands of times of magnification of a small crystalline array that nature has created. So that's how they're all done. I use different substances to create different patterns, but I never really know what I'm going to get.
Yeah, that's really exciting. It's imagery that the viewer really doesn't get a chance to see anywhere. These aren't things that you can, walk in the woods or walk next to a lake and see. You're getting really, really close.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I started down this road. Was I had a background in science, and I saw this under the microscope, these crystals. And I said, these have a real beauty that is basically unknown to us in the macro world that we live in, because you can't see something that small. I mean, and because the color is created by the shape of the crystal, not the crystal itself. You would never see this unless you had the microscope. And so I saw a potential there, Michael, is something that people would be really interested in. I knew that I found a beauty there that nobody else was really looking at or looking for. And it was the next step to take that into basically, could I develop that into an art form, because nobody else did that when I started 15 years ago, and nobody does it except me today, is could I make art out of these crystals down at this micro scale?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your background in science?
Sure. Yeah, I was always interested in science. Ever since I was just a young lad, I enjoyed the natural world, and even that close-up world was very important to me. And I think it was because I couldn't see very well when I was a kid, and I didn't have glasses at the time. So the only thing I could really see, the world looked like a Monet painting to me.
Oh my gosh.
And so I would look close up and I could see. And so I kind of always was looking down at the bugs and the small animals at the macro level. So I got interested in science very early on. I had a lab in the basement as a kid and a microscope early on. I always knew I wanted to study science, become a scientist, even though at that time I really didn't know what that meant. But so I started off by going to college, getting a biology degree, and and going into the research arena in academic labs and universities. And I enjoyed it immensely, but I felt maybe that I was missing something, so I wanted to get a degree in photography as well. So I did that simultaneously with working. I got a degree in biomedical photography because I knew that that would give me the skill set to take these macro and micro photographs that I wanted to do. I didn't know what I would do with that, but when I got out of the lab, I then went on to start my photography business. But I was in research for over 35 years, and I actually had a lot of experience looking through microscopes at cells and at crystals, because I worked in the pharmaceutical field. So crystals then kept coming into my life kind of as a challenging and interesting idea for a subject matter. If I ever went and became a professional photographer, I wanted to do something different. And that was the opening that I saw, and I kind of ran with that.
That's so interesting. Now, throughout your career as a scientist, was there any creativity that you were pursuing while you're a scientist? Were you just strictly doing let's see, the kind of close-up photography of crystals and all of those things? Were you just doing that on more of a scientific level, or were you pursuing some form of creativity on the side?
Right.
Or are they one and the same?
It had to be on a, science has to be very fact-based. You don't want to really manipulate an image. In fact, you want to be very careful that what you're doing is showing people what is really there. And it's pretty easy to, with a photograph, by how you light it or how you look at it, to kind of manipulate or change that to what we see. And especially, so I guess when I was in the lab, I had to be very creative, because that was part of your job as a research scientist, is do things that other people haven't done. But it has to be done in a way that is kind of sets up a certain process that you can follow and you can repeat, and that you can then explain to people what you did and explain the results. So I've used that in my art as well, really, as a part of the process. So although in the lab, when I was doing a project or a report or a research paper, it had to be very fact-based. I saw potential with the crystals to take that to a different level, where I was growing crystals, and that would open up a whole new area that I could explore. My photographs are very representational to this day. I don't manipulate the images. You see what I saw through the microscope. So I guess that's the scientist still in me, wants to show what I see, not really what I would have liked to have seen or something.
Yeah. That creativity comes through in composition and finding the right composition, color.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And I learned that when I was in photography school. We did a lot of work with, taking more traditional subjects, but you learn a lot about lighting and about composition, and those have carried over into what I do, even on that micro scale.
Right. And I'm sure some of that creativity comes through with actually growing the crystals and finding the right, I don't even know the right terminology, the right chemicals or whatever you're using to.
No, they are chemicals, and basically I get ideas and about what if, I ask a lot of questions. That's kind of what I've done my whole life. I ask a lot of questions. I said, what if I looked at what's in coffee or something? I'll be drinking my coffee in the morning. What are different things that are dissolved in there that may crystallize? Because that's a good subject matter. If I can find some crystals in there that are really beautiful, I mean, they're not floating around in there while we drink our coffee, but they are kind of part of the whole mix there. And if you deconstruct that and say, well, there's caffeine in there, what do caffeine, when you crystallize it, what does it look like? There's sugar maybe in your coffee. What does that look like when you crystallize it, put it under the microscope? So I kind of deconstruct these things and then get ideas. And because I want to pursue subjects that anybody can relate to. I mean, so my crystals are things like what's in chocolate, what's in wine, I'm working now on crystals of CBD, which is from the hemp plant, because CBD is appearing now in a lot of products, and I thought, well, that would be interesting to look at. Yeah. And so then I have to do the experiments to figure out how do you crystallize that? How can you make that a crystal that is going to be photogenic or fine art worthy? And that can take literally months to develop the techniques to grow those crystals. So the really science, the science part never really goes away. I mean, the science is always, part and parcel of what I do.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You're doing, this is the part that a lot of people don't see. They don't see the background work that artists are doing to get the product that they're showing in a gallery or in a space. And so it's great to hear your process, whether it's a month long, whether it's a week long, what you're looking for. Yeah, I love hearing those things.
Right.
Now I love to see the crystals in coffee. It may actually make me not want to drink it anymore if I really know what's in there.
Well, we managed to somehow muddle through, but I just, you have to remember that each crystals take shapes that are based on their molecular structure. So, we can look at crystals of quartz and we know, well, that looks like, you can almost know what it's going to look like because that's the way the molecule wants to get together to form a crystal. So like a snowflake is always six-sided, but you can make changes to the crystallization by changing the conditions under which crystals form. So you think about a snowflake, they're all different, of course, and it's because the conditions under which they form are always different as that snowflake falls to earth. And it starts to branch into, they're always six-sided, so there's similarities, but there's uniqueness in the pattern. And so I take my science background not only to select the crystals, but also to develop the techniques for recrystallizing those into a pattern that has a potential to find something in it. Right. So all that part has to work first. Then I have to be able to go in and find something. And then even like snowflakes, my crystals are not very stable. They will always be equilibrating with the environment around them. They're losing water or gaining water or whatever solvent I used. So those crystals are changing. So sometimes I only have literally 30 seconds or so to find a crystalline array or a portion of a crystalline array and take a photo before it will essentially over dry or crack or whatever and disappear. So there's a time component, and a lot of things have to kind of fall into place to get a great image. And so I do a lot of experiments that sometimes don't work, but I'll never know.
It's the exciting, that's the exciting part. And I know that you said kind of that question, what if, what if I took a photograph of this, or what if I mix these things together? And I take that as kind of an inspiration, because I kind of have that too. I'm always asking, what if I mix colors, or what if I mix this chemical into my paint? And so are there other inspiration or other things that inspire you to create, or other things that inform what you create?
Yeah, well, certainly other artists. It's interesting. Although I studied photography and got a degree in photography and learned a lot about other photographers, famous photographers, and enjoy looking at the work, there was no one who was doing what I wanted to do. So I draw a lot of my inspiration from just other artists. I mean, everybody from Van Gogh to George O'Keeffe to the abstract expressionists. I find familiarity in their work with what I see under the microscope, which I think is really fascinating. A lot of those, like George O'Keeffe, she was a painted macro images of the natural world, and she was inspired by that. And so it's that's kind of who I get as inspiration. But I certainly, when I started doing the work, I couldn't go online and find out how to do this, or what this should look like, or who was successful with this. There was no path to follow there, so I've had to kind of create my own.
Have you dabbled in any other art form outside of photography, just as a experiment, or just as a what if?
What if? See, I think that's enough. I get pretty busy. I got 2 careers already. No, I really haven't. But I love art. I mean, I love going to museums and looking at art, and I'm thinking now, I wonder what I can. These are 3-dimensional subjects, like all photography is, but it's really small. What if I made that even bigger and made it into a 3-dimensional rather than a 2-dimensional image? So I'm thinking now, what could I do with that? So I'm always have little ideas about where I might take the art next. And that does require learning more about different techniques, whether they be sculptural or whatever. Yeah, I always have that in mind about how I can expand that world to make it a little more visible, or maybe a different angle on it, perspective on it.
Yeah, that'd be great to see your work in 3 dimensions. I don't know how that would work, but that's up to you. So I know that you've exhibited in many places, and just thinking about Arizona, is there a particular place that is kind of your favorite place to either exhibit or a place to visit? You don't have to say the Arts HQ Gallery. It could be anywhere.
Well, I do. My biggest chunk of my time is exhibiting is spent at what's called the Arizona Fine Art Expo up in Scottsdale. It runs from the middle of January each year to the almost the end of March. 7 days a week. I'm there usually 5 days a week. But the neat thing there, Michael, is I bring in my microscope, hook it up to a monitor. I have a big gallery wall so I can show my work, but I can also show what's under the microscope and show how I do my work. And because my work is unusual in that respect as a photographer doing microscope work, I get a lot of people just coming to say, why is there a microscope here? And I can say, well, here's what I do, here's what I look at, here's my subject matter, and you can see it now too. So that's one of the few places where I can actually show my, have my studio there and show my processes very thoroughly to an audience. So I like doing that. I guess in some ways, if I hadn't been a research scientist and a photographer, I probably would have been an educator of some sort, because I really enjoy telling the story about this natural world that we are not seeing, because it's so small. So that's what I do. And I like traveling, because when you do something that's fun and unusual, you can find an audience almost anywhere that will connect with it. So,
where's like your favorite place that you have shown ever?
Oh,
not in Arizona.
Not in Arizona. Wow, that's a good question. I don't know if I have a favorite, because it always becomes more about the people that are there and the connections I make.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of shows in California, up in the Bay Area, up in Sausalito, for example, San Diego. And it's great audiences almost just about anywhere I go. I think people appreciate nature and images from that, and learning something that they didn't know existed before. So I just enjoy doing those shows. They're hard work, but they're very rewarding, super rewarding. Yeah.
That's awesome. I know you've answered this question already, but I'm going to ask it again.
Okay.
Why do you do what you do? Why do you love doing what you do?
Well, I think it's because every time I grow those crystals, you know, I always wanted to be an artist and a photographer. I just didn't know how to incorporate what my training really was in the sciences and connect all those things. But every time I grow a crystal and look through the microscope, it's a unique event. Think about how that is. It's basically an exploration, a discovery process every single time. And most photographers don't have that opportunity. I mean, certainly if you were a photojournalist, there's a changing world we live in and a changing environment, and even for a nature landscape photographer. But for mine, it's like, well, I have no idea what I'm going to see when I look under the microscope. And to see that beauty and then to be able to share it, to capture it and to be able to share it, is, to me, I mean, I can't imagine doing anything else. I mean, I just love doing it. You know, you can look at something, you know, when I was a kid and looking at nature on this macro scale, I could only tell people about it. Now I can actually show people and have them enjoy it, hopefully as much as I did. So I think that's a good reason.
This is a slightly harder question. I feel that what artists do, they kind of play around in the realm of beauty. Even if we don't really find what they do beautiful, there's always someone that will find beauty in it, depending on what they're creating. And so I want to get your ideas on just that term beauty and what that means, and how you think that might come out in your work.
Right. No, that's a good question. I mean, you have to, as an artist, you have to have a beholder. I mean, you have to have someone else to participate, which is one reason it's been such a difficult time, is we've lost our artists, we've lost our audience. We have our work, we can always do our work, but in many places, many times, we've lost our audience. So that part is really important. And I think a lot about why do people like what I do, or why do I like it? You know, I think it was John Updike who said beauty is a harmonious excitement of particulars. In other words, it's a lot of things coming together and connecting. And whether it's a composition or a pattern or whatever, I think that, you know, I look at it kind of as a scientific thing. How does that beauty really register with us, and why did I take that picture in the first place, and why does this person who's looking at it really enjoy it as much and want to take it home and look at it every day? I mean, those are great questions. I mean, they're still learning about why we why we like things, why we want things, and how there are different parts of our brain that are activated during different times. And so it's can be scientific and hopefully not sound cold, but it really is a fascinating study, I think, about why we find certain things beautiful, why do things connect and register with us, and why can we carry that for literally the rest of our lives, you know. It's a challenge as an artist, but I appreciate the opportunity to be able to explore that and share what I think and see what other people see. So hopefully that helps with.
Yeah, I love it. You're a pretty prolific artist. You've had a pretty extensive career in art and in science. What is some advice that you can give to some of the younger artists, emerging artists coming up?
Right. I think what I learned, and this goes way back to my scientific career, was I was always interested in a lot of things, and I had a very successful scientific career as far as being on projects with good teams that were able to develop therapeutics and it worked very, very well for me. It was a challenge, But what made me successful personally, I think, was that I had a lot of interests in a lot of different areas. I did everything from what was called biochemistry to molecular biology to pharmaceutical development to I was in a lot of different areas that I was able to pull together and take different parts and assemble them into some new ideas. And not all scientists were able to do that. And with art, it's the same way. If you can take from different realms and bring those together and find analogies where other people weren't seeing analogies, you can find something new and exciting to do, where you're not forced into a situation where you can only think about what other people have done prior to you. Because as an artist, the most satisfying thing is to be able to create something really special and share it that's different and new. And so I've studied creativity just in how we do that, how we come up with an idea, how do we get a creative thought. I've been studying that for 25 years. I've read probably every book that's ever been written on the subject, and it's a changing field. And it applies to art, it applies to science, it applies to almost everything in our lives. So I think learning about a lot of different things, you do have to be technically skilled at what you do. You have to be very, very good and practice and practice and practice what you want to do. But at the same time, you have to be able to bring in outside ideas and interests and then combine them in new ways.
Yeah, that's really great advice, especially coming from you, who has really created something very unique that, I mean, I would venture to say I haven't seen anybody else do it before. So yeah, thank you for that advice, and thank you for just sitting with me today and just revealing to us, to the audience, about who you are and your process. It's super enlightening, and thank you all for tuning in. Again, Expressions of the West Valley opens October 16th. Be sure to visit us on westvalleyarts.org and reserve a spot. Find more information about the show and some of our upcoming events. Of course, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for news and updates. Again, thank you.